What's up, everyone? It's Andrea. Today, we get Badass Troi. The Romulans really know how to murder a problem. And we ask the question, could you lie under pressure like that? Or would you crumple like us? Stick with us.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we're talking Season 6, Episode 14, Face of the Enemy. This episode was written by Naren Shankar and Renee Echevarria and directed by Gabriel Beaumont. Deanna Troi is captured and forced to masquerade as a Romulan intelligence officer to help several high-ranking Romulan defectors. Bum, bum, bum. Question mark. Do we care?
Yeah, so my initial thoughts on this was I remember Troi being undercover, but I didn't really remember anything else about this episode. And my overall feeling was that this was just not one to rewatch. But because I didn't remember anything, I was like, oh, this could be one of those like hidden gem episodes, kind of like last week's Aquiel, where it's like, I never rewatched this one. Like it's not on the rewatch list, so I don't really remember it. So maybe it's like actually really good and I just forgot. That was false. The truth is it's completely not memorable for me. Like it's just, I mean, I'm curious to hear what you think about your initial thoughts and your final thoughts, but it's just not a memorable one. It's like that one. What was that episode that with the Proto-Vulcan people? That
the other one we don't remember?
Yeah, when we watched it, it was like, how long has this episode been here? Like, it was like, I had never seen it before in my life. Like, I kind of feel like that with this episode. I had no context and no memory whatsoever.
Yeah, this is one that I usually skip as well. Like, my initial thoughts were, I feel like we've done the whole Romulan defector thing a couple of times already. Like, do we need to see more Romulan defecting? Like, we don't even care that much anyway. Like, this is kind of a way for them to keep like the Spock storyline alive. But that's when you could probably kill. Like, we don't care. But I also think it's always kind of novel and like cool to see like surgically altered crew members looking like different aliens. I appreciate that. Like, and after a while,
great, right?
Troi looked so rockin'. She
so
is
good.
The most kick-ass looking Romulan, and it was so believable. Like at the end of the episode, like when they like put her face back, I'm like, oh yeah, she doesn't normally look like this. Like, yeah, it was done so well. It was done so well. Yeah,
that's probably the best thing I think we'll say about this.
Yeah,
episode.
I mean, honestly, the episode was better than I remembered, but it was because I didn't remember it at all. Right, like so, but I thought the episode was fine. I thought it was a good episode. There was a lot of like suspense to it because again, like I didn't remember how any of it went. I had the same initial sort of vibe as you, where I was like, oh yeah, Troy's like a Romulan for some reason, and then that's kind of it. I didn't remember anything else. So, well, this episode starts off a little differently. We're in what looks like some kind of Romulan sickbay or laboratory or something. It's all really dark. It's all very shadowy. And we see a woman sitting up, but she's totally in shadow. And she seems to be in a lot of pain. And she asks for the computer to turn on the lights, and you can tell just by the voice, it's like, oh, it's Deanna. But like something is weird, because there's like Romulan, like glyphs all over the wall where you're like, what the fuck is going on? So she stumbles around in this darkness and she finds some light and she looks in the mirror and she about jumps out of her skin because she looks like a Romulan. And I was like, whoa, that's a pretty good opener. I feel like.
Yeah, I thought you were going to comment on the fact that she was asleep in her bed with her shoes on. So I'm surprised.
There was also that. I will say, of all the uniforms, I feel like the Romulans have one of the coolest uniforms, and I can totally see 100% why Minecraft ripped them off, because it's just like boxy and square. But I will say the one part of the Romulan uniform that I've never liked is the rain boots.
Shoes? Yeah.
The rain boots. Yeah. They're all wearing Wellingtons. Like, is Romulus like a really wet planet? Like, why do you have rubber boots?
And if it is, what does that have to do with space travel?
Yeah,
Nothing.
Exactly.
But yeah, I don't love the Romulan costumes. I think they're interesting and intricate, but they're not beautiful. And they don't all have to be beautiful, obviously. But like they look like the most uncomfortable outfits, including
they do look itchy.
Look so uncomfortable. They're just stiff.
They look really itchy.
And yeah. I'm sure you remember, like I do, the shoulder pads from the 80s. Those were not comfortable. Fun to wear, fun to look at, but just not comfortable. And that's what I feel like about the whole Romulan look. It's like everyone has a stick up their butt. That's what they're going for. Like, that's the vibe. So I don't know. In any case, I was like, haha, she has her shoes on. I know Andrea's going to see that. But yes,
I did, but I didn't think she was in bed. I thought she was like in like a lab or like a sick bay or something. Her
quarters. Ooh. And yeah, I think that was a good opener too. You see Troi and you're just like, what? And honestly, this is the only part of the episode I remember. It's this part where she's like, oh my gosh, I'm a Romulan. Like, that's all I remember. So I was like, oh wow. That was like the first 10 seconds. We have a whole episode to go. Like, what could be going on? So when we come back from commercial break, this guy comes in, Sub Commander Navek, and he's like, kind of scanning her brain and maybe trying to like ease her headache or something. I don't know what he's trying to do. It looks like a medical tricorder or something like that. But
yeah,
Troy's just like, what's going on? What are you doing? Get away from me. Yeah. She's like freaking out, totally understandably so. And Navek does not have the time really to explain fully to her what's going on. So he just really briefly is just like, listen, you have to listen to me. I have something to say. You have to listen right away. And she's just like, wait a minute. And she's piecing together that she was at this seminar on some off-world planet. You know, she wasn't on the Enterprise, and then she was attacked suddenly. There was a hypo spray, and now she's a Romulan. And what is going on? Yeah. And Rebecca's just like, look, this is your name. This is who you are. This is what you're doing. And you're on a secret mission, and it's really important. And I just thought, like, I wrote this in my notes for you. Would you trust this dude at this point?
Oh my God. I wrote, what would you do, Shereese, in my notes as well? Because this is terrifying. One, you're not yourself, right? Like, you look like somebody else. You look like a different race.
That's
where it's
enough
like,
to
what
freak
the
me
hell?
Out. If I woke up and looked not like myself, in even the slightest way, like my eyebrows were gone or something, I'd be like, oh my God, my eyebrows. Like, I'd freak
like,
out
what
about
happened? Yes. And here, this is something that always triggers my anxiety. Like, when I see this in like movies or TV where somebody's like, listen, I only have 4 seconds to give you this like vital information before I have to go. Okay. Enter code 137 mark 2. It's like, well, I can't possibly remember that right now. Oh my God. Like, because you're also like, your mind is like, what's going on? Like, what is happening? I need answers. Right. And so he's like, you are no longer Deanna Troi. Your major recall of the Tal Shiar, which is the Imperial intelligence of the Romulans. Like, it's basically like the SS or the secret police. You must instruct Commander Torres to proceed to the Caleb sector, like 124 mark, whatever. That right there, I'd be like, I need you to write this down or something. Like, seriously. I can't remember that. I can't.
A data pad or something, but like right now I'm freaking out. I cannot remember the dates, the times, the names.
Right? And he says, your only chance to get off this ship alive is to do as I say. And I was just like, this is all happening so fast. I would just be in a panic. I gotta say, Deanna, they've been
handled
building
it very well.
She did, because the writers have like built her character up. Like, her character has been like in training for something like this, right? Where it's like, if they gave this role to like season 1 or 2 Deanna, she would have just cried a bunch and then been executed, right? But like, now she's like a badass. Well,
she would have cried a bunch, and right before they execute her, Riker would have swooped in and saved her.
Yes. And they would have beamed her off, and then it would have been okay. Yeah.
Okay.
No, and you're totally right. But here, she's able to kind of take it all in. And he's like, you have to do as I say if you want to get out of here alive. Like, I'm sorry, there's no more time to like explain. I would say, to your question, I wouldn't trust him, but I also wouldn't have a choice in the matter.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, it matters a lot that he knows who she is, where he's like, he's not like,
who are you talking about? There is no Troi, right? Something like that.
Right, where it's like, the more gaslighting, the less like I'm willing to like believe in this person or do anything they say, right? But somebody who gives you some truth, like, that at least gives you like a kernel to like hold on to for your sanity.
Yeah, and I also appreciate that, because Troy's an empath, and he knew that, he said, you're empathic. Am I lying to you right now? And then she said, no. So, because I think that was really in her favor, that she could sense that everything that he's saying, as crazy as it all sounds, is, at least in his mind, absolutely true. Right. Which I don't know how much easing that would do, because like a crazy person, or, you know, some kind of crazy serial killer or whatever, could also believe everything they're saying. But in this scenario, at least she had that to go back on, like, he's telling me the truth, or at least what he thinks is the absolute truth. And I agree with you that there is no choice. And you do look like a Romulan. And he did say, you're a Federation officer looking like a Romulan. If you get exposed, you will be executed immediately, which we all know is true. So it's like
100%.
I agree with you. There was no choice but to trust him. And I think that was a really crappy thing to do to her.
That was really, really crappy.
And if they had this stuff planned, why couldn't they have had this planned? Like, you know what I mean?
Right. They couldn't just they couldn't ask for a volunteer.
They couldn't ask.
Riker would have volunteered in a hot second, by the way.
He actually would have. And would have done amazing. He would have done great undercover.
He would have been great.
Yeah.
But luckily Troi is actually really, really good. I was like, wow, Troi, I just have way more respect for her after this episode because of how she handled this. Mm-hmm. I would have crumpled immediately. So Nivek takes Troi to see Commander Toreth. Toreth questions her as to like why she doesn't have her normal security detail or how long she's been with the Tal Shiar and what she's doing here. I would crumple immediately.
What's the cargo she's carrying and why don't you tell her what it is?
Yep. I do not lie. I'm a very honest person in general. Like I'm very to the point of being really blunt a lot of times, but like I don't lie on the spot. I don't have like a lot of practice with that. And anytime I've had to try to lie on the spot, I fail spectacularly. I'm really, really shitty at that. And like I just can't off the top of my head do that. And I was like, wow, this is really good.
To not look at her Confederate. She couldn't look at Nivek to be like, what should I say now? Because that would totally give the whole game away. Mm-hmm. So she had to really stand on her own. And luckily the Tal Shiar are very secretive. So she could just keep falling back on. And very powerful. So she could just keep falling back on, those are your orders, because it's what I said. It's all a need to know basis. Like she could kind of do the, generic government rigmarole of pulling the wool over her eyes. But man, I have to say this Commander Toreth, I liked her a lot. Like She's really liked her. She was so clever. Mm-hmm. And like every question she asked, you were like, that's legitimate. Mm-hmm. Every concern she had, you were like, that's legitimate. Mm-hmm. Showing attitude to the Tal Shiar, and she was just so fearless and ballsy. I was like, I really like this commander. I mean, even though she's a Romulan, so she'll like probably stab you in your sleep if she had to. I just liked that. I just really liked her. And I was like, man, I'm kind of bummed that Troi has to like trick her because she's so clever. If only she was like a dumb captain or like
then
really
it would have been
something.
It would have been better. Toreth is an amazing character. The actress who portrays Toreth is Carolyn Seymour. She does such a spectacular job in this role, and she really is like incredibly commanding of the room, and it really becomes this like obvious and immediate like power struggle between Toreth and Troi, right? And even Nivek is like, you can pull the Tal Shiar card,
but don't push too hard.
Don't push too hard though, because this commander, she will execute you without like a second thought. And I was like, damn. Also, Carolyn Seymour, she looked beautiful even as a Romulan, but without all the Romulan makeup and prosthetics, like stunningly beautiful actress, just so beautiful. So really has like looks and like the presence too. I was like, wow, you go girl. But yeah, Toreth is demanding like, why is she forced to load this cargo aboard the ship without knowing what's in it? How do we even know it's safe? And Troy's like, you can be sure it's safe. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been loaded. And Toreth is like, oh, goody. The secret police is telling us it's safe. Now we can all rest easy. Like every person on this bridge has had a personal experience with the Tal Shiar, and none of them would describe it as comforting. And I love how Troi was obviously feeling kind of unsure in the role.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the moment where she like sinks into it, though, where she's like, she really turns like a complete badass. And she's like, that cargo is the property of the Tal Shiar. You will not open it. And Toreth says, on whose authority? And Troi says, mine. And if you do not wish to undergo another personal experience with the Tal Shiar, I suggest you don't question me again. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Troi is terrifying.
She was awesome.
Terrifying.
That was a moment where you're just like, wow, she could really hold her own in this completely dangerous and risky and crazy scenario.
Yep.
And to having a straight face the whole time. Like, on the inside, she's panicking and freaking out, but on the outside, she just brings it. She plays.
She does.
And I was like, how does she even know how Tal Shiar would act? How does she even know what to say and not say? Like, I always think this when Picard is interacting with the Klingons, because he's so Federation and he's so diplomatic, but the Klingons don't communicate that way. That's not how they talk. So it's always seen as a weakness. And so Picard results to threats, but in a really political, like soft way.
Yes.
Whereas Klingons are very upfront. They're not like passive aggressive. They're very upfront. So I'm always like, why does Picard talk to them? Why doesn't he talk to them like a Klingon? Because that would get a better response. And the same thing here. I kept asking myself, how does Troi know how Romulans communicate with each other? How does she know how Tal Shiar communicates with other people? Like, how would she know to not give it away by, like, for example, being diplomatic when you're supposed to be aggressive? You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I guess the mystery really worked in her favor. She just had to say as little as possible and put a lot of threats.
I mean, she really pulled like, to me, it was very, very like Gestapo SS type, where it's like, you do not question what we're doing, right? And like, that's the terrifying part of like these secretive branches. Like every country has some secret police, secret something, right? Like every government's got some secret branch of something going, right? But like you put some might behind that, like you've got some power and some secrecy. And this is where people start disappearing in the night and never reappearing again, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, she really pulled that. And she's like, you will set course for 102 Mark IV because those are your orders. And I was like, I felt like Nivek, where I was kind of like looking from one person to the other.
Like, is she gonna obey or is she not gonna obey?
Yeah.
Thankfully, she was like, fine. You're like, phew.
Right?
Because I don't know where else this could have gone.
Girl, I don't know where. Yeah, this was about to be a really quick standoff. But guess what? We see the Enterprise all of a sudden. They've arrived at this research station. They're picking up this very unique passenger. What I like to call the most unconvincing looking Romulan of ever beams on the ship.
I put, wow, he even has a nutty haircut. So the thing about when humans try to do the Romulan haircut, because we saw this with Tasha Yar's daughter, she had the Romulan haircut, but she looked, oh my gosh, stunning, amazing, beautiful, wonderful. Like the haircut really, even though it was nutty, on her, you're just like, yes,
it's like the V haircut. Yeah.
It's like V bangs, but you're like, yes, because she's Romulan. But this dude, you're like, where did you guys just pick him up at a bus station? Like, what the? So apparently, this dude, Ensign Desev, is he defected to Romulus 20 years ago, and now he's back because he changed his mind. I was like, yo.
So this is I wrote he seems to be a human who's defected to Romulus and now he wants to redefect. Is that called a refect? Like what are we
Yeah, he wants
a mulligan. What is this called? A fucking oopsie? No, I'm sorry. You've already switched sides. This is not a two-way street, okay?
Yeah, you can't.
This is a one-way alley. You go that way and you stay there. That's not a thing. You don't get to defect and then unfect, okay?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's the thing about being a traitor as opposed to like any other kind of crime.
Yeah.
Because when somebody's a traitor, like a lot of times the penalty for a lot of countries is death. It's not like imprisonment forever. It's death. And it's death because traitors can't be trusted. Like, you can't. Like, you keeping you around is more dangerous than actually killing you, which is super sad, but it's true. So when he showed up, I was just like, ooh, buddy, I don't even know why you came back. Like, you should have just stayed gone.
Yeah, but he should have stayed gone.
He shows up and Riker's there to meet him. And he's like, immediately puts him under arrest for, for treason. And then he's like, I need to see Picard right away. And it's really, really urgent. It's important. So Riker's like, okay. So later on in Desev's quarters, Picard shows up. And my thought was, why is he under house arrest? If he's a traitor, shouldn't he be in the brig? Why do we, when do we use I feel like we never use the brig. Same thing with Aquiel. Like, she was the main suspect in a murder.
What the hell?
Just running around the crime scene. Like, what's the brig for? Is the brig only for
stomping around all the evidence? Yeah.
Criminals? I feel like defectors brig, like, to me. But anyways, he's chilling in these beautiful quarters, living the life. And Picard comes in and he basically tells him he's on a mission from Spock. And that Spock said this mission requires quote unquote cowboy diplomacy. And he should listen and go rendezvous at some freighter in the
Caleb sector. And there's some cargo that needs to be brought back.
Yeah. And Picard believes him. I was like, man, I wish we had Troi right now. For her to be like, yeah, he's lying. Still a traitor. He's lying. Yeah. Or something. You're like, nah, airlock him.
I mean, I gotta say, Desev sure looks earnest. He's got like the Bambi eyes of like, I swear. And Picard's like, fine, right? Where I'm like, there's a lot of captains in this episode being like, fine, set course for wherever. Right? seems to be a thread. Yeah. So he's like, there's this freighter headed to the Caleb sector. Spock needs you to pull some cowboy diplomacy and rendezvous with the freighter and bring that cargo back. And it's important between the Romulans and Federation to have some sort of peace. So it seems like Desev left wherever he was from to, defect to Romulus. Now he's refecting, but now, he's disenchanted and wants to come back. And it's like, Picard, I'd be like, listen, man, you made your bed. Now you lie in it. Like, you don't get to like triple cross people. That's not a thing. But okay, so Picard's like, fine, set course for the Caleb sector. Now aboard the Warbird, Troi goes to Nevek and she's like, I think it's time you tell me what the fuck this is all about. Right. So he takes her to the cargo bay to go see this like secret cargo. And the cargo is actually people. It's Vice Proconsul Moret and his 2 aides. He's one of the highest ranking members of the Romulan government. He's defecting because of how repressive the Romulan government is. So it's just like defection central up in here. Now, I wrote, hold the phone. Nevek just like opened the cargo. It seems like a stasis pod or whatever, kind of like something that Kalar was in, but like a little bit roomier.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it does look really cool. But he just opened the cargo by pushing like a single button where I was like, there's no locks on this, like no key code, no secure, like anybody could just wander in and touches
his shoulder like, oh my gosh, it's a person. And again, like to the point of stasis, when I think of stasis, I always think of like some kind of, I don't know, gel, fluid, freezing, chemical process.
I mean, they did have a cool little like device on their neck that something
but
them
I
into
think
stasis.
of it as more than like being asleep.
Yeah.
That like when I think of stasis, I think of like your body's cells division is arrested, which it doesn't have to be for this. For these purposes, they just have to be immobile. But like the word stasis to me means more than like asleep, like a medical coma. You know what I mean?
Yes, when I think of stasis, I actually think of The Empire Strikes Back when Han goes and rescues Luke like from the like being out in the ice all night. And remember he's all like messed up and stuff, so they bring him back and they put him in that liquid and like he's got a mask on, he's like breathing oxygen, but he's like that's what I think of more as like stasis than just like sleeping in what looks like a really comfy wine crate. But okay. With no locks or security on it. So that to me was just weird.
And cargo have no locks or security.
I know. And so like Toreth is like, I demand to know what's going. If I were Toreth, I would literally just walk over there and be like, boop, and push the button and be like, what the F? Like, these are people. Okay, this is a defection.
You don't even need to do that. I mean, that's what the scanners are for. She could have just done it from her seat.
True.
You could have just been like, computer, what's in the cargo?
Exactly.
What's in the container?
Computer, what's in the box?
Yeah. Computer, what's in the box in cargo bay 4?
Yeah.
And the computer would be like,
people?
Romulans. Yeah.
Yeah.
People. There are people in there. And you'd be like, which people? I'd probably tell you the exact person.
Totally.
That they're in stasis, like all the stuff. So maybe that's the security measure. That's as far as they go as like anti-scanning. I don't know. But like this doesn't really... This doesn't really track, but we're just gonna be in pretend land. We're gonna Star Trek it and say sure. Now Nevek says if we can deliver Moret safely, Spock is hopeful that they can establish an escape route for thousands of other dissidents who are in fear for their lives. And so like okay, so now we're getting some backstory. But here's the thing that I was like record screech. On top of everything, it turns out there really was a major recall of the Tal Shiar and she was killed so Troi could take her place. I was like, what? But there had to be. This couldn't be a fake.
I know, but they couldn't like kidnap her or something. Like they had to actually execute a member of the secret police to have the. Oh, I was like, what? Like that?
Yeah,
whole thing.
The Romulans
and they just glassed right over it. Like it was like, oh yeah, no, we murdered her, so you could take her. Yeah, I was like, I'm sorry, I need you to back up this crazy train and tell me what's going on here.
The Romulans are very permanent thinkers. Yes, so if there's a problem, they just kill the problem. Like they don't kidnap the problem. They don't house and feed the problem. They don't save the problem for the problem to escape and come back later to get revenge when it grows up. They murder the problem immediately, brutally, ruthlessly, completely. They don't do kneecap shots. They don't do that. They completely get rid of the problem. So I also was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But then I was kind of like, I wanted Troi to be a little bit more like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. But she was just like, okay, what else?
I know. That's like, what I thought. I was like, huh? Troi, you're not even remotely
not even a little bit. She was like, why didn't you get a Romulan to take over for this person you murdered? And Nevek is like, we could have used any Romulan for the first part. Like, why didn't you get a Romulan, one of the defectors, to just play this role? So we could for the first part, but we need a Starfleet officer for the second part. And then she's like, okay, what's the second part? And turns out they've hired some mercenaries to help them with this cargo, to take the cargo from this ship over to a Federation starbase or something like that.
Yes.
So Troi is like, they're pirates, they're mercenaries, we can't trust them. Like they're, whatever. And Nivek has no time for this. They already have a plan. This is their crazy plan. This is the plan. So it's like, we have to trust them. It'll be fine. And so Troy's like, okay. So then he also says, by the way, there's a senior meal that you're going to be expected to be at. And she kind of tries to get out of it. Like, I'm just going to stay out of the commander's way. You know, I don't want to ruffle any more feathers / expose myself more to being caught. Like, the less I show my face, probably the better. And Nivek is just like, no, that would be suspicious. You have to attend. And so do I. So I'm going to go on first. And then you wait a few minutes and then you go on second. So it doesn't seem suspicious. Okay. So it's just like,
suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Yeah, that's 100%. That's 100% it. And Tora starts prodding into Troi's background to trip her up. And this is one of those things that, again, always gives me anxiety in movies where, like, somebody is pretending to be somebody else, right? And the person who's suspicious is like, did you ever take so-and-so's astrometrics class at the academy? Don't you love the way they used to, like, XYZ? And then the imposter would be like, yeah, I remember that. And the first person's like, lies, they never taught at the academy. You're like, fuck, right? Like, that's how I feel,
they've been dead for 300 years. Or
and you're like,
they taught math, not physics. Ha ha ha. And you're like, oops.
Oops. Yeah. So Troi is doing what I would do, which is she's being as abrasive as possible to discourage any further conversation. Yeah. Right.
Which is not effective because Toreth
not
is not
effective. Toreth ain't having it. Okay. Toreth reveals that the Tal Shiar dragged her father away in the middle of the night and he was never seen again. So she 100% has a bone to pick with the Tal Shiar. And Troi is like, I don't need your devotion, only your obedience, right? And Troi even goes so far as to say, your father was a traitor to the Empire. And Toreth is like, no, he wasn't, right? So it's like, it's like, Troi, girl, you probably didn't need to say that. Like that, you're just stirring the pot.
The Tal Shiar would say, which is probably what the Tal Shiar would say.
That's what they would say. But I was like, man, you already have an enemy in Toreth. Like, let's not go making it worse, okay? Because Toreth is going to airlock your ass.
She like you said, she's trying to be as abrasive as possible to discourage further conversation. But Toreth is like, does not mind a fight. She does not mind an uncomfortable conversation. She's here for
That's why she's a commander, because she's not afraid. She's not afraid of this. Now, while this is all going on, the Corvallian freighter rendezvous with the Warbird, and they're like, okay, we're ready to transport this cargo and deliver it safely to the destination. And Troi goes to Nivek and she's like, he's lying, right? Like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. And what does Nivek do? Blocks it out of the sky. I was like,
he murders the problem.
I guess
he did.
That's his thing. See, I wrote, why would you destroy that ship? Like,
because they know the plan.
Come on, man.
And they're planning to double cross them. So they cannot ship the cargo over there because this is like the most precious cargo ever. They can't ship Troi over there. They can't risk the entire mission on people being dishonest. And they also don't want the mission to be if they let them live and they say, never mind, we're just going to get another freighter or whatever. Now, like, it's the same thing with traitors. Now they can go around and tell what happened and expose everybody. So, like,
it's the cheater problem.
They treated them treated them like traitors. Yeah. And he murdered the problem. And Troi was just like, shocked, but the commander was even more shocked, and Troi had to pretend to like not be shocked because Nivek immediately threw her under the bus and was like, Tal Shiar told me to fire, so I had to fire. And Troi has to act the part of like, yes, of course you had to fire because and she's just like, oh my gosh.
That's what I thought. Nivek just threw her under the bus. He's like, I beg forgiveness. Major McCall ordered me to fire. No, I didn't. Yeah. No, I didn't. I'd be like,
But then he would have been airlocked, right? Which she needs him. So, and she could bear the brunt of that decision as Tal Shiar, but he couldn't. Yeah. As some like lowly worker, he couldn't just be firing at ships and blowing them up willy nilly. But it was just such a like shocking moment, right? You're like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God. There were people. Right. So Troi goes full general mode and demands that Toreth just back the fuck up. And she orders the ship be cloaked and just wait. Right. So she goes and
thinks. Yeah. She storms off the bridge and it was like,
I need to think. Right. And I was like, oh, girl,
that was actually a good call. That was a good call. Get out of there.
In these moments, I would say I need to think. And then I would spend half an hour having my mind spin out of control where like no thinking could actually be done. Like I can't come up with
I would have been like, where's the shuttle? I got to get out of here. I can't do this. I got to get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
And there's like no escape. But thankfully, she actually was thinking of some kind of solution. Nivek comes to her quarters and they do brainstorm like, what can we do now?
Yes. Now, meanwhile, the Enterprise has shown up at the rendezvous point and finds nothing but like the little remnants of the Corvallian, the freighter. And Captain goes to speak to Ensign DeSev, and he's like, so what the heck are we doing here again? And I love that DeSev's like, okay, so here's the thing. I didn't personally speak to Spock, but like my friend spoke directly to him, and like my friend wouldn't lie. And I was like, see, these are the questions that Picard needed to have asked in the first place, because this right here is why you have a refector fucking up the plan. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, he had no idea that like Nivek would have blown the freighter out of the sky.
Right.
Like the ship should have been there, but like maybe you should have said that like this was a secondhand message that you received.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, Spock has asked me to come here to speak to you. Why would Spock speak to this dude? Who the fuck is this guy? Nobody.
Yeah. So he definitely said Spock told him. And now he's saying, well, Spock didn't tell me directly, which is like, he should have mentioned that earlier.
He spiritually told me to do that.
He told me in a dream. So that's why I did it. And it's like, buddy, that's not the same. So anyways, then he tells them to make because at this point they're at the rendezvous point and they haven't yet found the remains of the ship.
That's right. It's like there's just nothing there.
And it's just like nothing there. And they're like, DeSeva, you know, and Worf is like, he lied. DeSeva's a liar. And we can all agree he is because he's a traitor. So at some point he lied to somebody.
Yeah.
He lied to somebody about something. But so right now it's seeming really suspicious, but at the same time, you know, and Worf's like, it's a trap. It's like, but there's literally no one here. Like, if it's a trap, this is a really stupid trap. So
it's an empty trap. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an empty trap. It's like a trap with no cheese on it. So what's the point of that?
Yeah.
And then DeSeva's like, okay, the ship was made out of titanium, whatever. It gives like the markings of the ship so that they can scan for it. Yeah. And Picard's like, why didn't you just tell us this in the first place? Like, why? And he was like, well, it's because living on Romulus for the last 20 years, you learn to not ever offer information. You only answer exactly what's asked or whatever. And it's just a hard habit to break. And Worf is just like, see, can I shoot him now? And Picard's like, no, I still trust Nutty Haircut. So
do you?
So he does for some reason. And then when they scan it, that's when they're like, oh, the ship is whatever light years away. And they go and find it. It's just like a debris field. At the same time, the Romulan ship is hiding in the debris field cloaked. Yep. And the Enterprise comes to the debris field and they're just like, you know, and Data's kind of looking over everything. And he's like, yeah, it looks like a Romulan ship just blasted it into pieces. So now it's feeling more trappy, like more of a trap. Yes. But still kind of confusing because as far as they know, there are still no ships around, but we don't know why the ship blew up. And DeSeva is like zero help. Like he's just no help at this. All of his help is exhausted at this point.
Yes. Now, at this point, Troi is freaking out. Right. Because
understandably so.
Right. Because the Enterprise is right there. She's so close to getting away. She can taste it, but she's aboard this cloaked warbird. That's like, how the fuck am I going to make this happen? Right. And so, you know, Nivek essentially tells her that now she has to make this like impossible plan happen. It was a difficult plan already, but now it's like, no, now you need to convince Commander Torres to head to Federation base to deliver the cargo herself.
All the security measures that are
there's no way.
The two areas of space. There's like no way for them to pass through.
We're never going to get through the gravitic sensor nets. Like, and Nivek is like, well, we will if you provide the access codes. And I was like, hold on a second. Does he expect that Troi has some top secret codes, or is there just like a universal sensor code for Federation personnel? Because I feel like code is.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably maybe not a universal code, but like a set of codes that she definitely has the codes for. Because at no point did she say like, codes, I don't even have those. So it's like, yeah, she has.
That was my first thought too. Because I was like, it's not like this was a mission she trained for and she got I was like, you just kidnapped her from like some fucking just like some random psychological, psychological like conference and like just So
and she happened to have the codes. So there have to be some like. So you know what? It might be one of those things. Like sometimes we've seen this on. I don't know if we've seen this on this show yet, but sometimes it's like your personal access codes can access Federation stuff based on your personal clearance, right? So she could access anything through Troi Omega 3374 or whatever, because you know what I mean? Like she can access it because she has clearance. So it could be something like that, where if you just kidnap any officer of a certain rank, they can open certain things, which actually would make sense more than a code that literally anyone can use. But in any case, she had these codes. And at this point, I'm like, I think Nivek is super sus. I'm like, he just blew up the freighter and the freighter was like suspicious anyways. But then I started thinking maybe these people aren't really defecting. Maybe this is like a triple, quadruple cross where he just wants to get the codes so that they can like cross into Federation space whenever they want to. And I was like, don't give him the codes, Troi. Don't give him the codes. Like,
yeah, nobody say any codes.
Way.
There's got to be a better way. If you just think a little longer, right? She's trying to get a message to the Enterprise because the Enterprise is now here. They've found the debris field. They can tell by like the anti-proton decay that it's the Romulans, and they must still be nearby. I guess.
Here's the good thing that happened though with the Enterprise being there. After Nivek destroyed the freighter and Commander Torith was like, what the F? Recall. Then Troi was like, well, they were Federation spies. And somehow seeing their faces, oh, that's what she said. I recognize that guy. And I know he's a Federation spy. So I had to destroy them all. So the good thing about the Enterprise showing up at the wreckage was that it verified her story that she totally just made up. Right. Commander Torith was like,
that was tidy, wasn't it?
Yep. She was like, oh, I guess you were telling the truth because the Federation's here. So clearly the freighter was Federation spies. And Troy's like, phew. But at the same time,
just like I said,
I get over there. You know,
yes.
Like, I'm sure they would help us if only they knew.
Right. And like she and Nivek are trying to brainstorm. And Nivek is like, there's no way this is going to work to like get a message to the Enterprise. And she's like, listen, she blows a gasket. She's like, I've been kidnapped, surgically altered, placed in danger. I've gone along with your plans this entire time, and you're going to fucking figure out a way for the Enterprise to track us, or I will go to Torith and I will tell her that I've discovered you're a traitor. Is that clear?
And she will airlock you on the spot.
She will. And Nivek is like, crap, right? So 2 seconds later, magically, he's like, oh, I actually did think of a way, like where I was like, okay, so okay, all right. Sounds a lot like Desev, where it's like, there's some more information I didn't say. So he's like, there might be a way to tweak the magnetic propulsive coils on the warbird just a teeny tiny bit out of alignment. It might be enough to create like a resonance field so the Enterprise will be able to detect it. Like it'll kind of be like a little spotty, but it's worth a shot. It'll be just enough to sort of fly under the radar of the warbird where they won't detect this like little change, but the Enterprise might pick it up. So it's working. The Enterprise picks up the distortion and then it drops and it picks it up again and it keeps like appearing and disappearing. And so, you know, at this point, Torith is like, how the hell are they moving around in this weird pattern and sort of figuring out like they can see us, right? Or like they can detect us.
Yeah. So at this point, the Enterprise sets because Data picks up the distortion and it's like, oh, it's showing up. Oh, it's dropping. Oh, it's showing up. Oh, it's dropping. Yeah. And then Picard is like, so I guess Deceva does have a little bit more useful information. So Picard's like, could this be a cloaked Romulan ship? And he's like, it could be because they run off whatever kind of, this is actually cool. Their ships run off of a quantum singularity. So basically instead of a warp core, they've got like a tiny little black hole, which is so cool. And I think
I love that idea so much.
Yeah, I think this is the first time we learn about that in TNG at least.
Yes, and then we'll see it again in Timescape, which is
one of my favorite episodes.
Oh my god, it's like one of the best episodes of ever.
Yeah, but this is when it's first introduced, which is just like a freaking cool idea. Like it's just such a cool idea. So anyways, he's mentioning that and he's like, yeah, so it totally could be a cloaked ship. So he's like, all right, so Data, set an intercept course to where that ship is going. The ship is making its way slowly through the debris field with its cloak because it knows that the Enterprise can pick up its warp trail. If it just tries to like warp out of there. So it's trying to like sneak out of the debris field and then go to warp so that it can like get away clean. But the Enterprise is tracking its little slow crawl. And it's a 27-minute crawl, according to the timestamp. They're like, it's going to take 27 minutes. So that's how long Troi has to figure out a solution. Yep. And they set an intercept course. And that's when Torith is like, wait a minute, how are they setting an intercept course? How do they know exactly where we're about to be? Is our cloak working? They're like, yeah, the cloak is still working. So she's like, all right, we need to do a test. I want you to run our ship directly into theirs, like come as close to their hole as possible without actually crashing. If they move out of the way, then it's proof that they really are tracking us. If they don't move out of the way, then it means it was just a coincidence. They just happened to, make a beeline straight to us. It was total coincidence. Yeah. They were just looking at the rubble or whatever. So we're going to test this theory. And then Troi is on the bridge, like, and what happens if like they move? She's like, oh, we'll destroy them. Like, of course, that's of course what we'll do. Which again, in this scenario, coming from Toreth's point of view, she's absolutely right. Like they need to get the heck out of there. So that's what they do. They plan they plan a course to just like basically make the Enterprise think they're going to ram them. And Data's like picking up on this, and he's like, this vessel's coming, something's coming close to us. The distortion's coming towards us. It's going to like hit us head on. And they're like, what's going on? And so again, Deceva comes in handy, where he tells Picard, like, well, this could be a Romulan move, and this is how Romulans are, and they're going to attack first, ask questions later, da-da-da. So then Picard's like, all right, let's back us off. And honestly, when I was watching this, I was like, don't move, Picard, don't move.
Yeah, don't move a muscle.
He doesn't know. So he backs it off, and then she's like, aha, I've got them. Take off our cloak and attack. And you're like, oh, crap. Like, the game is up. They don't have their shields up for some strange reason. Enterprise, they're just, like, not ready for a fight.
They're not ready at all.
I was really worried, actually. Like, oh, man, they're going to have this really hard hit and whatever. But Navek fires, and it is the equivalent of throwing a really big rock at the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't even bust out a window. Like, it does nothing. And they're like, and Worf is like, they hit us, but it caused like -10 damage, like no damage at all. And it damaged them more to send that shot than it damaged us. And then while they're looking around confused, these 3 Romulans beam onto the bridge suddenly.
Yeah.
And they're like, what the, who is this? And I think it's DeSeba who's like, oh my gosh, it's so-and-so. It's the guy.
Yeah, it's the defectors.
Yeah. And they're part of the underground. And they're like, oh my gosh. Like, so they're kind of piecing it together. But on the actual ship, on the Romulan ship, the Commander Torith is like, what just happened? Why didn't that work?
Right. And this is where things start falling apart, right? Because, you know, she has this like attack, but turns out the attack was like nothing, right? It was kind of like deflector shield dust, right? And so Troi tells Torith to step down or be removed by force. And this is when Torith is like, what the F just happened? So her engineer is like, wait a minute. It looks like something was beamed over, like, while this like fake attack was happening. Like, we basically nerfed the guns so that they wouldn't actually like have any power. And so this is where she's like, it's Troi, right? She's immediately like honed in on Troi, right?
She knows, and Troi and Navek. She's like, you're both and traitors.
Navek, right? So Torith defies her, and Troi goes full blown Pablo Escobar on them. She's like, if you defy the Tal Shiar, you will not bear this punishment alone. Like, your families, all of them will be there beside you. And the reason I say she went Pablo Escobar is because this is exactly what he was famous for at the height of his power. When coming across like law enforcement, he became very famous for saying this phrase, plata o plomo, which means silver or lead. Like, we can either pay you a significant amount to step aside and let us run our drug empire, or we'll pump you full of lead and like dump your bodies, and we'll find your families and kill all of them too. And he did that. He did that a lot, right? So it was very like this whole Tal Shiar thing to me is so interesting because it's just another name for like any number of like secret power moves, right? And I just thought like that is just so fascinating, like to rule by fear like that. And what you have to do to even gain that reputation to rule by fear is like you rise to like the height of power that like somebody like Escobar did, right? Where it's like at some point it's like nobody can stand against you because you're so powerful, you're so ruthless, right? Really? Yeah,
it's because you have no scruples and no morals, and that's how a lot of crime bosses come up. Is they're more ruthless than the next person.
You have to be.
It's awful.
That's not. I'm thankful I don't live that life. Yeah, seriously.
It's awful. So I got the timeline mixed up a little bit. Before the beam over is when this happens, because the plan is I'm going to destroy them, and Troy's like, that's a mistake, and Commander Torith is like, fire, and then right at that point, that's when Troy's like, belay that order, and if you don't, I'm going to kill all your families, and everyone's like, on second thought, we're not gonna follow that order. And thankfully she had Navek there to back her up, because Navek, pulled a gun on Torith, took her weapon, and was just like, we're all going to listen to what the Tal Shiar have to say. Listen, and everyone's like afraid, understandably so. So then she sits down and she's like, now watch how it's done, Toreth, and she's like, I'm going to be very, I'm going to do this with diplomacy and with grace, and then I'm going to fire on them. And you're like, wow. So she even pulled out like the Starfleet card and the Romulan card, right? Like, I'm going to be diplomatic and then I'm going to fire on them. Yeah. So when she opens a channel, Worf sees her and just about jumps out of his skin, because they immediately recognize it's Troi as Romulan. Like, immediately, just like we did.
I love that she speaks first, because she's like, I made your recall of the Tal Shiar. Like, it's immediately like, don't say a word, Picard.
Don't say anything. Because they would have been,
they would have been like, Troi, what are you doing over there? And then it would have been all over, right? So it reminded me, I actually
there, girl.
I saw something on TikTok that reminded me of this a lot, where it's like the caption was like, when you answer your sibling's call, but your mom is in the car. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm in the car with mom. You're on speaker, just so you know. Like, it was like that, right? And then it cuts over to the mom who's like looking at the daughter like, are you serious, right? So that's what it felt like, where she was like, I made your recall of the Tal Shiar. I'm Romulan, right? Like, immediately.
I'm Romulan for reals. Like, yeah, for a long time, too.
Right? Yeah, it's don't say a word, Picard. Like, don't say anything, Imzadi, nothing, right? So luckily, because Picard has been around the block a few times and he's been Borg once or twice, and there have been duplicate bodies and all this other shit. He knows enough to say nothing, right? So she mimes some diplomacy and offers to come aboard the Enterprise to talk peacefully, right? So Picard kind of clues in and he's like, Worf, get a signature lock on her. The minute the shields are down, like, get her out of there, right? So that's what happens. Like, when the Enterprise lowers its shields to beam her over to talk peacefully, that's when they do the fake fire on the Enterprise. It's the baby phaser, so it doesn't do any damage. You know, that they transport the 3 Romulans in stasis to the bridge. Why would they send them to the bridge and not anywhere else? I don't, whatever.
Sick bay.
Or whatever. But anyway, the bridge is as good a place as any, apparently. And that's when Torres quickly smells a rat and figures out what's happened. So Navek,
and she goes to shoot them, but Navek has her weapon. And I was like, ooh, thank God you took that weapon like 3 minutes ago. Because she reaches for a weapon and then she's like, traitors, they're both traitors. And Navek goes for his weapon, but somebody at the con shoots him before he can shoot her, before he can shoot the commander.
Yeah. And he's disintegrated.
This disruptor, this was like a Utah move. Like, this disruptor, there wasn't even ashes left.
Like, you just become steam. Yeah.
Yes, he just became non-existent. And you're like, oh my gosh. And they turn it over to Troi and you're like, oh, I hope they don't shoot her too. I mean, she's also a traitor, so they could just shoot them both. But for some reason, Torres is like, oh no, I'm going to take my time with this one. Like, for some reason, doesn't want to just shoot her, wants to like torture her, airlock her, I don't know what.
Still going to kill the problem. But I think also because she's pretending to be Tal Shiar, it's like, oh no. We need to do a whole investigation as to like who you are and what you're doing and where's the real major recall and all that stuff. Because Sub Commander Navek was like small enough in his like professional stature.
A threat. Troi hadn't pulled a gun. He was a threat. It looked like he was about to shoot somebody. So they were like, no.
So Torres is like, who are you? And Troi does the thing that I've only read about this, but you're supposed to do, which is say nothing. You just become totally mute, right? Like, you just say nothing.
Because you can't say anything good at this point.
There's nothing you can say. Torres, I've always liked you. Man, no, there's nothing you can say. Right? Torres is like, no worries. We'll soon figure out what you did, and then we'll execute you. And so the Warbird drops its shields to cloak, which seems like a really bad design flaw, by the way.
Yeah.
And as soon as they drop their shields to cloak themselves, that's when Worf is able to like finally get that lock and yank her out of there, and she gets back in the nick of time.
Yeah, because they drop shields so they can go to warp, and so Worf pulled her out like right before they went to warp. Yeah, no, it makes no sense. But had they waited like another 2 seconds, they wouldn't have been able to track them, and they would have gone into Romulan space, and we would have never seen Troi again. So thankfully, they beam her over, not to the bridge for some reason.
That was weird. I know, right? You can just drop some bodies in stasis right on Picard's floor, but like Troi, no, she goes to like cargo bay 17. All right, whatever. But like they get her back in the nick of time, and then there's a time jump where it jumps forward, and like now she's in sickbay. Beverly's able to surgically get her face back so she looks like herself. And
she actually might have been beamed to the bridge. I don't really remember where they beamed her.
No,
but the point is they beamed her somewhere.
It to a transporter room. They put her in a transporter room. But
already, whatever. She was fine. She made it. She didn't get killed, which is like such a relief because she could have easily been killed so many times.
Yeah.
So many times during this crazy plan.
Yeah, 100%. Now the rescue turns out was successful. The high-ranking government officials are on their way to peace talks or something.
Yeah, it turns out it wasn't a big scam. So yeah, that's a relief. And Spock really did send Nutty haircut. It was true. So
the least convincing looking Romulan of ever.
He really went convincing Federation officer of ever. Like
he just
the worst person to send.
Just looks permanently surprised and afraid. Like just really agog.
Untrustworthy.
Also, let's just throw in a dash of incompetence in there too. Like this dude's got it all, and all in the wrong ways. But anyway, so that's where the episode ends. my final thoughts were like, it was a lot better than I remember, but it's because I didn't remember it at all.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy the suspense because since I didn't remember ever seeing this episode, like I remember Troi being a Romulan, but I don't remember the plot. I didn't know, like, obviously it was going to end fine, right? Because Troi, she's in the next episode or whatever. Right. But like, so I knew it was going to end out okay, but I was like, how the heck are you going to get out of this? I actually really enjoyed the suspense on this one. What are your final thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a really interesting story idea. Like, I thought this particular version of defection was super interesting because Troi was surgically altered to help a defection, which is different from what we've seen before. But for some reason, this is just not super memorable for me. I'm confident that 3 weeks from now, I will have completely forgotten what this episode's about.
Me too.
Than Troi becomes a Romulan. Like, that's still what sticks in my mind. So this is not going to be added to the rewatch list for me. I do agree. I think there was like lots of suspense. I didn't know what was going to happen at all. I didn't know how they were going to get out of it. I don't know how they were going to rescue Troi. I was surprised when the Enterprise showed up, all of that. But like, it's not going to be added to my rewatch list. That being said, I do have to say this episode is still much better than Aquiel. They're both kind of forgettable to me, but this one's actually like, it's not a bad episode. It's just forgettable. That was like both bad and forgettable. You just were about to say, what's Aquiel, huh?
No. Oh, I remember Aquiel with like rage. Okay. Like comparing anything to being better than Aquiel is like saying, at least it's better than that time I had explosive diarrhea. Like everything is better than that. Literally anything is better than Aquiel. Girl, Justice is better than Aquiel. Oh, gosh, okay.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, they're both trash.
At least Geordi's not running around acting a fool, falling in love with a murder suspect. Man, okay, I'm not even going to get into that. This is just making me mad all over again.
So that's how I felt. I felt like it's forgettable, just as forgettable as last week's, but a better episode, but still forgettable. Like I'm going to forget this immediately.
I agree with you. Like, you know, a couple of weeks from now, I'm going to be like, Face of the Enemy doesn't ring a bell. But when I sat down to watch this, I was like, oh, this is going to suck. And it didn't. It didn't suck. It just isn't super memorable. Yeah. So I guess that's a plus. Anyway. All right. So on that very, very tepid note.
Our final thought is it didn't suck as much as we thought it would.
Listen, sometimes that's the best you can get, I guess. You know, I don't know. Yeah. So, okay, on that note, next week we are breaking down season 6, episode 15, Tapestry. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll catch you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.